All right, welcome everybody. Glad to have you here today. I appreciate you being here for the last session of CHO. My name is Virginia Koch, and I'm the Director for Residence Life at Auburn University, and I'm going to be talking to you today about integrated course design for high-impact educational programs. I'm going to be doing some audience participation things, so if you want to be on TV with me, it's not exactly TV, but if you want to come up and if you're contributing, you want to use the microphone and that, I invite you to do that. If you want to sit in your seat and just talk, be sure you talk loud so that the folks at home can hear you, and we'll have a good interactive activities throughout the workshop. I also want to mention I'm a visual learner, so I have a lot of slides. Please don't stress yourself out by trying to take notes on the slides because they're going to move fairly quickly. And you'll have access to all of this later, so don't worry about that part of it. Take notes as you're going because there's going to be several times where I'm going to ask you if you have questions. So if there are things that I'm talking about that you're not 100% sure on, there'll be time to do that. So by the end of this 1 hour program, you're going to be able to do 4 things ideally. And that would be to understand integrated course design as a promising tool for all the workshops and programs that we do on campuses, to interact with each other. And for those of you on campuses away from CHO, I invite you to bring a friend in so that you can talk with others during the workshop, or talk to yourself, I suppose, if you're alone. But also, get excited about using integrated course design. I've been using it for a number of years, and I found it's extremely effective and useful in the programs that we're doing. And also to interact and collaborate with others in the workshop here and at home so that you can get a sense of how you can contribute to significant learning. I highlighted these sections on the PowerPoint because I want to just point out, I will be coming back to this, and the learning objectives are a little different maybe than what you've seen in other formats. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So a little bit about me. I've been using integrated course design since about 2009 when I took a class at Loyola University Chicago with Dr. Jennifer Hayworth. And she was a longtime faculty member teaching about curriculum for higher ed professionals. And taking that class actually changed my life. I ended up working with her for my dissertation and really using a lot of integrated course design in many, many ways since then. I've also had the opportunity to work with Fink, who is a national expert in redesigning courses, particularly using this integrated course design method. And I've taught in the higher ed department at Auburn University about this whole ICD model. And I'll be presenting at a KUHI with a workshop on integrated course design as a pre-conference in Seattle this summer. So I'm going to start off with a few activities, and then I'll get into some mini lectures. Of course, I have a lot of content I want to share with you. And then we'll do some reflection, again, that moment to ask any questions. We'll give you some theory to practice, some real life examples from things that we've been doing at Auburn, and that I also had opportunity to use at my previous school. So you'll get a sense of what those things are. And also, I'll give you some opportunities of how you can learn more about integrated course design. So just show of hands, how many of you have a master's degree? Almost everybody. PhD? Do you have a couple hands? Okay. So that's actually pretty similar to the research that I did for my dissertation when I was looking at the curricular design of RA training programs. And most people that I surveyed did a survey of 338 KUHI members across the country, and almost everybody had a master's degree. But when I asked about, have you had any curricular design education, how many of you have had some kind of coursework in curricular design as part of your master's? Oh, good. Probably about 10 hands here. Any professional development besides this one? And okay, a few hands. So again, that's kind of similar to what I found with my dissertation. But we had a large number of people that didn't have any kind of training in curricular design, but here they are designing workshops, programs, courses, what have you, for RAs and students living in the residence halls and all of that. So there's a gap in the knowledge of how we're actually going about doing this, and what ends up happening when there's that gap. We rely on what we did, either what we saw as RAs, what we saw as students. Faculty members do this too. You oftentimes, every faculty member has their own way of running a class, but they haven't had training in how to be a teacher either, so they're just kind of winging it and doing whatever their faculty member did when they were in college. So what I'd like you to do now is to think for a moment about your worst learning experience. Raise your hand when something comes to mind. That could be in college, it could be something in high school, it could be a class you're taking just for fun. Raise your hand when you've got that worst learning experience in your head. And I'll wait till all the hands are up. All right, I think almost all the hands are up. You'll have to come up with something in just a minute if you haven't thought of something yet. Well, what I'd like you to do is partner with a person and share what that experience was and one thing that could have made that experience better. Go. You have about 30 seconds to wrap up. Okay, so do I have a volunteer, somebody who wants to share their worst learning experience? Come on up. Or not. Someone want to come up? Come on. So I see your name's Justin. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and turn around, please. There you go.
Hey everyone, my name is Justin Shreve. I'm a hall director at Virginia Commonwealth University. My worst learning experience probably was in college, undergrad. Had a calculus class because I was a biology major undergrad. Calculus class at 8:30 in the morning, and I took Calc AP in high school, so I was like, I'll be okay. We'll be good. Just repeating that information. So it was 8:30 in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the professor, we didn't have a book for the class. He literally stood in front of the class, didn't use PowerPoint or anything. It would just like put little problems on the board and be like, all right, go do your homework. And it was like, usually it's the 80-20 rule. It was like 95, 5%. And so ended up getting like a D- in the class, even though I love calc, I love math. But being a visual learner and not being able to get my hands dirty in some of the work or coursework or a book or something to see made it really, really difficult. And most of the students in the class failed. There's like 3 students who passed, and they were all early college students. So I was like, really? But yeah.
So what could have made that better?
If he would have used the book, if he would have connected the homework and little things he had us doing outside of class, that would have been nice. And also if he would have just taken a chance to listen to what the class needed. And also it didn't help that it was 8:30 in the morning, but I guess provided coffee as well.
Okay, good. Thank you, Justin. Okay, great. So that's a great example. And I'm sure you all had lots more examples just like that, right? So we've all had that moment where just like, oh, please just get me out of this. Get me through the semester or what have you, just not what you were hoping for. And, that's what integrated course design is about. It's about recognizing those moments where things could go horribly wrong, and it's one tool to be able to help fix the problems that exist with the learning design. So integrated course design in 10, 15 minutes. That's about as much time as we're going to devote to kind of walking you through this process. But I wanted to just kind of give you an overview. Y'all are smart people. There's a fabulous book on this, which I will recommend, Creating Significant Learning, Integrated Approach to Designing College Courses. I substitute the word courses and put in workshops and programs, because that's mostly of what we do. If you do have the opportunity to teach a course, fabulous, you can certainly use this with that. But Fink is one of the experts in faculty development. He's been president of a professional development association for faculty members, and there's this whole other world out there of people who care about effective design of courses. And so he's been one of the leaders in this for many, many years now, and just recently published the second edition of his book in 2013. So highly recommend that you take advantage of that. There's D. He's really just a side note, I saw on Facebook that he had just celebrated 50 years of having been in the Peace Corps, and 50 years ago. So he was doing a little lecture on that with a fellow that he did that with. Really interesting person. If you get a chance to, if you read his book, you'll pick up on that. So one of the things that he talks about is this idea that you should have a dream for your course, something that is bigger and broader than your learning outcomes, but this overall dream. So in your deepest, fondest dreams, what kind of impact would you like to have on learners who participate in your workshop or program? And then is that workshop, when you're developing the workshop, in the next 1 to 2 years after participating in that, and maybe for the rest of their life, what is going to be that change that you're going to see in the learner? For Justin and his, was it calculus class? Maybe not so much, but you already loved calculus. He might have drained you a little bit from that experience, but you certainly moved on from it and didn't lose your love of math, I'm sure. But those are, what is that long-lasting impact that you want to have on your learners? If you think about any course that you could ever teach, take a moment and make a note to yourself about what would be some of, in a word or two, what would be some of those dreams that you would have for that? What would be an outcome that you would hope that people would take away? Any words come to mind? Yes.
I would say empathy.
Empathy. Great. What another one? Yes. Authenticity. Okay. Other things. Yes.
Maturity.
Maturity. Yes. We often teach subjects that we want people to grow from. Those are great examples of those big dreams that, how can you embed empathy and a sense of caring about others into the total outcome of your workshop. And if that's your starting point, you're going to think differently about everything you do related to that course. Now, Dr. Fink says that there are some situational factors that you need to consider. Justin mentioned some of those. It was an 8:30 a.m. class. He needed coffee, that he was a visual learner and it wasn't appropriate for his learning style. There are some things that you would need to know about yourself as a teacher, about your students, about the external expectations. When we teach RAs, everybody has expectations of what RAs should know. And they're the first to criticize us when, for some reason, they fail and don't remember one of those things. There's also the nature of the subject. Some subjects, if you're talking about sexual assault, it's going to be a much different feel to the workshop than if you're talking about community development. Who your learners are, and those special challenges. So when you think about this workshop, and if any of you presented during CHO, you can think about your own too. What were some of those unique challenges that I might have faced for designing this workshop? It's a lecture style room. I'm being recorded. It's broadcast live, no sweat. What else? Yes?
You don't know what your audience knows.
Right, I don't know what you know. So you also,
As I was saying, our knowledge of integrated course design.
who here has ever heard of integrated course design? Yay, four hands out of 30. Okay, good. So yeah, I didn't know. Y'all could have known something about it already. So that would have been a difference. Yeah, I would have had to modify things a little bit. So you start to get a sense of those things matter. And that is really the foundation of everything that we want to do with integrated course design, is pay attention to all of these situational factors. It's really difficult. You cannot take a program that you did at your last campus and plop it on your current campus. You're going to find that doesn't work. And that's because the situational factors are different. So for integrated course design, there are two big concepts that you need to be familiar with. This first is this idea of the taxonomy of significant learning, which looks like an atom, or somebody called it a flower, but there's this idea that there's things you need to know about the subject and things you want to feel about the subject. And there's also this foundational knowledge of what your situational factors are as it relates to the rest of the design of the program. So here we kind of mapped it out for you, and you start with imagination. You want to be sure that you're being very creative about the design of your program. Again, that big dream comes into play here. And the first thing you're going to want to do is design your learning goals based on your situational factors. Then think about your feedback and assessment activities, and then your teaching and learning activities. Now that's a little backwards for some of us. What's the first thing a lot of us do when we're thinking about a workshop? What's that?
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? So what are those activities maybe? I just went to a workshop on PK. How do you pronounce that? Katakucha? And that might be something you want to do. So that's maybe your teaching and learning activity, but that's not where you start, according to Fink. You need to start with your learning goals. Now, a lot of times we jump into the learning activity, come up with our learning goals, and oh yeah, somebody will ask you, what's your assessment? Oops, and now you got to throw in some assessment. It's a little backwards. So this is a little counterintuitive, but you do want to start with your goals, move into how are you going to know that they've achieved these things, and then define what your teaching and learning activities are going to be. Now, these significant learning goals are part of this taxonomy. It's that little atom that you saw before. And I'm going to get into explaining this in a little more detail. So these this side of the chart here, the foundational knowledge, application, and integration goals. Those are a lot of things that the faculty and a lot of us will do in the classes. You need you can't just expect people to know something about emergency procedures. You have to explain how you're actually going to work with them, what the protocols are and the expected response and that sort of thing. So you want to, and a lot of times we are pretty good at applying those things. So you want to do something active with that information and integrate it. Maybe we've had RAs who have been trained as EMTs and things like that. So some of them come with a lot of previous knowledge about it. Some have never dealt with an emergency situation. It's always been the parents. But then you also want to add these human dimension, caring, and learning how to learn goals. And those are the goals that really make the difference in your presentation. So he talks about there being a special value to each of these. And this is kind of the pixie dust. This is the stuff that makes all of your workshops very special. So your foundational knowledge gives a basic understanding of the learning. Application allows the knowledge to become useful. Integration allows the learners to make new connections and develop a sense of intellectual power. Then you have, just take it away here for some. So we have human dimension will give you ability to create emotional intelligence about others and oneself. That's that empathy piece that someone mentioned. Creating an energy for learning and making it part of their lives is that caring. If you, I really care about integrated course design. I've really endeavored to make that part of my professional practice. And learning how to learn, it enables people to learn in the future with greater effectiveness. So you develop a learning plan for yourself. You become aware of what books and resources and things exist so that you can move on with that. So for this workshop, I set some learning goals, and you'll see how they relate to each of the different learning categories. So but down here, you'll see that one goal actually relates to two different categories, and that's okay. Sometimes there is some overlap, but I do want to encourage you to think about having at least 4 of these learning types of learning goals in your activities and programs that you're planning. Dr. Fink says that if you don't have 4, you're not going to have a well-designed course because it's not going to be balanced. You can have foundational knowledge and integration and application, but if you don't include at least 1 more from the other side, it's not going to be balanced. He also suggests that there are verbs that we all should use for designing our learning goals, and they're a little different than what you may have seen in other settings. Who's here familiar with Bloom's taxonomy for learning? A lot of hands go up. Yes, he has actually based his taxonomy on Bloom's taxonomy and then expanded it. And if you've seen the modified versions of Bloom's recently, he also taught whoever designed, I don't think it was Bloom anymore, but those folks have also included integration and some of these other caring sides. But some of these verbs you'll see overlap with. And it's not to say you can use one at the exclusion of the other, but this is a little bit different. I would suggest that if you're getting started with integrated course design, just use this as a formula. Use these verbs to get started. I always refer back to this, even though I've been doing it for some time now, because these verbs are really helpful in helping to get you thinking about course design in a different way. So when you're looking at your evidence and assessment, you want to ask yourself a few questions, such as how will we know if students are getting where we want them to go? How will we know if they are achieving the goals set for them? And how can we translate what we will consider good evidence of student learning into authentic or other kinds of meaningful assessment? Here's some examples of assessment activities. Who's heard of classroom assessment techniques? A few hands have gone up. This is a lot of teachers use this, and some faculty who are catching on. But classroom assessment techniques are about embedding assessment in the classroom to help the teacher and the students know if they're understanding the material. There are entire books, websites. If you just Google this, you'll find lots of resources available about classroom assessment techniques. And those are things that you can embed into your workshops and programs. Teaching and learning activities, of course, we're very familiar with those. Lots and lots of great ideas have come out of housing and residence life over the years. But that's where you want to ask yourself, what are the best activities that will meet the learning goals for the students? You have to be selective. You just can't throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks. You want to be very intentional about what those learning activities are. There will be times when the assessments and the teaching and learning activities overlap, and that's okay. That's actually a recommended strategy. The important thing is to connect all the dots. One of my top 5 strengths is strategic. If you have that in your portfolio, I see a heads nodding, this will make total sense for you. If you don't, pull somebody onto your team that does, because you want somebody to help you figure out how all of these things connect. But you want to make sure that you are having all of your situational factors, learning goals, feedback and assessment, and teaching and learning activities all fit together. If you are developing something more than a 1-hour workshop, like RA training, for example, you will want to actually use this castle-top model that he recommends, where you're planning what happens in the workshops and what happens outside the workshops. I've been doing this for a number of years. I've been working online training for RAs for about 10 years now, either through Blackboard or Canvas. And we give students summer assignments to read, and with mini quizzes where they have to assess their own knowledge. And it also helps the presenters that are reinforcing doing those workshops when we do our fall training. So if there are things that we know they got, we don't have to spend as much time on those things, but we devote the time to other things and be more strategic. So this instructional strategy enables you to layer and scaffold and structure the learning so that it all kind of comes together. So, thumbs up if you're tracking me. Thumbs down or sideways if you're not so sure. How you doing? I see lots of thumbs up. Awesome. You guys are good learners. Any questions before I move on? Yes.
So you mentioned the 4 goals you had in this program.
Yes.
You talked about things that you had to have 4. And I guess my question is, aren't there differences between the fact that you're doing course design, you have 16 weeks, 3 hours a week, versus maybe a workshop where you have an hour? There has to be, I would think, some differences between that style of design versus the design for a short period of time.
Yes. And so is there a difference between design for a semester course versus a 1-hour workshop? I've even drilled down to half-hour workshops using this design model. You may not, you can easily come up with, I want them to care about this topic. I want them to know how to find more resources on it. Like those are 2 of those non-foundational learning goals, even in a half-hour workshop. So I would say I'm a proponent of, even in the smallest workshop, you can use this model to design it. Now with a big semester-long course, of course you're going to have more goals, but they want to fit them into the various categories. And you're learning your actual foundational knowledge may be 8 to 10 goals just in itself, because there's various topics that you're going to want to cover. In his book, he also gets into how to develop that for a larger course, of course, because he's talking to faculty in the book. Does that help answer your question? Any other questions? So I'm going to give you some examples of things that we've done at Auburn that will hopefully bring this to life for you a little bit. So 2 years ago in the summer, we decided that we were changing our student conduct sanctions. So previously, when students had fire safety violations, they had to write a 3 to 5 page paper about fire safety. Well, poor student that had to write it, and poor us who had to read it, and just getting them we wasted all kinds of time getting them to write the paper, for goodness sake. And long story short, we decided not to do that anymore, and we decided to have a seminar that they would attend in place of writing this paper, and we would spend 1 hour with a group of students in a workshop talking about fire safety, which also sounds deadly, but we wanted to make it fun, so we used an ICD to develop the course, which I'm going to tell you about in just a second. We also developed another seminar on community values and ethical decision making, which is, again, another 1 hour class for people who were just messy or disrespectful or noisy or those types of violations. And again, we wanted to give them a warning, but we also wanted to do something educational with that. So what would you imagine were some of the situational factors that were for this fire safety seminar? The time it was offered. Yeah, we had to find just the right time so people would actually need to sign up. Other things. Pardon?
The knowledge that the presenter had on the topic.
The knowledge of the presenter on the topic. We were actually having a whole bunch of people presenting. It was GAs, professional staff, a mix. So we wanted to develop a curriculum that all of them could follow and thank you. Got a time. I love it. That all of them could follow, that they could have it. We need some consistency, right, between all the different workshops and the different presenters that were presenting. Be over here.
Yeah,
Yes.
the attitudes of the participants.
Oh yes, the attitudes of the participants. This is a mandatory session that they have to attend on fire safety of all things. So yes, so we knew that they might be resistant. We knew this. Come on, they should know this from kindergarten, right? Like, come on, like, exit the building when the fire alarm goes off, for goodness sake. Everybody should know this stuff. the seminar could be boring, which we were determined it was not going to be. And it's a short period of time. It's 60 minutes or slightly less. And it's offered throughout the year with multiple facilitators. So we had a lot of challenges. Our learning goals were to value the importance of fire safety in the residence halls for themselves and others, recall Auburn's residence hall policies related to fire safety, and make decisions about the correct actions to take in the event of an actual fire. And we assess this by having discussions about a fire video. We found one of those online that shows the burning room and how the flames go, and in less than 2 minutes and whatnot. We also did a quiz, and that was one of the questions on the quiz. We had discussions about this another fire video, which I'll tell you about in a second, and we had actual pictures from the fire that had happened on campus. We talked about how do you think the fire started? What do you notice about the room? Things like that. And then also, you'll see that some of these teaching and learning activities accomplish multiple goals, as well as the quizzes. So for teaching and learning activities, we wanted to have some fun with it, so we used Dwight's fire drill from The Office. If you've ever seen that, it's very funny. It gets completely silly. It's about 4 minutes. And we, after showing the video, we said, well, what did they do right? What could they have improved on? And that was a really good icebreaker. From that point forward, they really loosened up and realized like this, we were serious about fire safety, but we were also taking a creative approach. We talked about very short mini lectures on why you should care. We related it to the Auburn Creed, which talks about obedience to the law. We looked at some of the common violations, possible solutions. So if you want your room to smell good, and that's your interest, what's another solution? You can get the plugins or the scented, waxes and things. And you see light bulbs going off. Oh, I never thought about that. You're looking for ambiance. That was often a little thing. Then you could use the flameless candles and things. So we also had discussions about these videos, and we did a little case study and quiz and an evaluation. This is an example of a lesson plan. It was planned out to the minute so that we knew there was going to be some consistency, and we asked anybody we did a workshop for all the presenters, but then before they presented, we asked them to attend and watch one in action before they actually had to present. We did a 5-question quiz at the end of the workshop just to assess knowledge, and then they passed the paper to a partner and they graded each other's papers. We almost had 100%, almost always. So how did we do? Out of 294 residents that completed it, they did an anonymous survey after the evaluation, and you will see that that we had almost 95% agreed or strongly agreed with high mean scores, that they knew what to do if they were trapped and could not evacuate, that they knew what to do when the fire alarm sounds, what to do when they evacuate the building, and generally about our policies. And some of these logistic things we were able to tweak along the way. So they couldn't find our rooms where we were having these. Some of them weren't familiar. They were a lot of freshmen weren't familiar with some of the buildings where our classrooms were. So we modified that and included that in our instructions. So real simple things. We were able to do some formative. This is also helping us to know if maybe one of our instructors didn't do such a good job. Now, generally, we are pretty consistent, but it also, for the person that was coordinating all of this, gave us some session-to-session immediate evaluation. For the entire seminar, we asked students, what would you do differently? And yay, most of them said, I wouldn't violate policy again. That's a great outcome. We love that. And did you learn at least one new thing? 86% said yes. And when we asked them what it was, they said evacuating safely, what to do if I'm trapped, policies and rationale, and so on. So they learned some stuff, which is excellent because should have learned it in kindergarten, but now here we are again. So our big dream was that they learn at least one new thing. So last year we found with all the students that participated, 86% total, so they learned at least one new thing. This year we're continuing the workshops. We had 91% say they learned at least one new thing. So we've been really happy with the results, and can't complain with any of that. One thing that happened this year, which kind of goes back to our situational factors, is we had an influx of international students in one residence hall on campus. They're part of our Auburn Global program. About 200 residents in a 300-person building, a whole bunch of men, a whole bunch of students from China, a lot of smokers. Weren't there for any of our orientation. We had like 2 minutes during the Auburn Global orientation, which we're fixing for next year. But what we found was they were our highest population with violations. We saw a huge spike in violations with that population, and across the board on every single fire safety policy. They didn't know what they weren't there for the first round of fire drills. So when we had more in January, none of them evacuated. I mean, just one problem after another. So we had to go back to, and so we knew all these students were coming to our fire safety class, and we designed one just for them, redesigning, taking elements away and adding some other elements. So the fire safety video with the office we took out because it was a little confusing, and for American students who are used to seeing that, we knew that would click with them, but we weren't so sure about the international. We spent more time talking about their home campus or their home fire safety policies, what they experienced in previous, where they lived at home and that sort of thing, and slowed down the pace of the workshop a little bit so that they have more time to process and think, because there is a language barrier. Not all of them are as proficient in English as we would hope. So it's made a huge difference, and it again shows that you need to adjust for your audience. We've also been able to work with our Auburn Global program to get all of the students to come to workshops that are just for them. So next I want to talk about RA training. Of course, that's a much bigger program, and there's lots of different subparts of RA training. This is an example of a graphic syllabus. I had our assistant director in charge of our staff training go to a workshop that was provided by our Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning. It was a 3-day workshop, and they were using ICD to help faculty redesign their classes for the fall. So I said, I know she'd already been learning ICD along with me since I've been at Auburn about 2.5 years now. And so I knew she knew enough about it. I said, take this time, that 3 days really, that they're doing this workshop, and think through our entire RA training program and come back with some ideas about how we can improve. So one of the things they asked her to do was this graphic syllabus. And so she has, starting here with safety and security, learning to work with your supervisor, learn the policies, community development, learn to confront, write reports, make connections with other staff, learn about campus resources, help people, work with your co-RA, know how to deal with crisis, and reflect with a person in bed. Just kind of a day in the life of RA training, right? So, and repeat. So I thought she did a nice job with this. This was a wall in her office where she mapped out the entire 8-day program, or however long that was, 1, 2, 3, 4, quite a few days of RA training. And this big X right here was when nobody was available for any workshops. We were doing a training with our Green Dot program, bystander intervention, and a whole bunch of people were involved in that from across campus. So that was the afternoon we gave the RAs a free afternoon. But each of the Post-it notes relate to 4 different topic areas or themes for the entire training. So that would be community development, safety and security, administrative tasks, and personal development. And the Post-it notes helped her keep track of what was happening at each of the workshops, as well as the stuff that's floating up top are things that needed to happen outside of the in other parts of the training. So whether it was online or assignments in the evening or that sort of thing. We also differentiated between training that we were having for returners and the new staff. So that was also kind of on her notes in there. So this was an example of scaffolding. So we had to really plan out by hour and day what was happening And you couldn't talk about writing or give them an assignment about writing an incident report until you taught them how to write an incident report. So things like that had to all be taken into account, and also outside presenters when they were available. Make sure schedule clunky sometimes, but you have to always accommodate your outside speakers. We knew we were doing some things very well behind closed doors, fire safety training, and we had really good structured in-hall training, but we wanted to improve on certain aspects. One of the things we realized is you cannot improve everything all at once, so you have to pick and choose. Some of the things that we did was to develop an on-duty training and really enhance that. So we looked at all the various components throughout the training and made this into a rich learning experience, which is another one of these integrated course design concepts that Fink talks about. So we created an online PowerPoint and quiz that they did in the summer. When they got to campus, we did in-person discussions about scenarios. We did supervisors were critiquing them on their responses. We had group discussions in training workshops. We did a mock round activity where these little paw prints were all around the residence hall, and they had to kind of look for them, just like you would look for things going on in your hall. It was kind of a mayhem exercise, you know, like what could go wrong. So we've got, you know, I am a stumbling, slurring resident. You know, I am a half full bottle of alcohol in the bathroom, things like that. And then we would talk about what their responses are. And then, of course, the big finale was behind closed doors and doing real life interactions with others, with the RAs as actors. Another thing that she came up with during this workshop with the Big EO Center for Enhancement of Teaching and Learning was we're talking about conflict mediation, and there's a portion talking about working with roommates. She found some online memes or actual photos of passive-aggressive roommate notes. I don't know if you've ever seen this. If your heads are nodding. And so they're really funny, but they're also very poignant, and it helps you know, have a fun activity. So we did role playing with these passive aggressive notes and use them as examples of how we would work with roommates, and had a lot of fun with that. The RAs really enjoyed that. Another thing that we did was emergency response assessment. And of course, like as part of their online training, they learned all about our how to identify people with alcohol poisoning and things like that. And one of the first activities that we had them doing, and here they are drawing, was to make a drawing of a person with alcohol poisoning as a group. So it's reinforcing, like, you know, usually if somebody's responding to something like this, we're not doing it alone, so we want them to always pull in another RA. So they work together as a group to draw a photo or a drawing of a person. I don't know if you can see all this, but there it says they're dehydrated, they've thrown up, it says peeing, but you know, slurred speech. They got all the right things, and then they would share this as a group and share their drawings of what this intoxicated person looks like that possibly has alcohol poisoning. So we were able to get a sense of, do they recognize all the signs? They were able to work together to remember all of those signs, and then show each other that they knew, and also have a little fun doing it and have fun looking at each other's drawings afterwards. Another interactive activity that was quick, but it also helped us know if they remembered how to do this, was to place a person in the recovery position. Thank you. And so the recovery position is just a lot of fun. You either know it or you don't, and we could go around and correct people and help them understand what they needed to do with that. So that's kind of some examples of some of the things that we did. We also taught the GAs about integrated course design. As I mentioned before, when they were doing 30-minute workshops or 1-hour workshops, we had them designing using integrated course design model, and they were able to make significant improvements on making those much more interactive, even if it was just a half hour. There are a couple words of caution I'll say before I close. There can be what Dr. Fink calls a broken design. If you don't follow all of these pieces and connect them all together, your course might not work, or your workshop or your program. You can figure that out after the fact, or you can try to like assess it before and make sure that all these pieces are combined. But anywhere along the line, if you don't follow these options, it can kind of break down. So you want to watch out for that. The next thing is there are some barriers. I will tell you that using the ICD model takes more time. And when I was doing my research, I asked people, would you use this model? A lot of people said yes, but then what would be some of the concerns that you would have? Time constraints, lack of knowledgeable staff, and inadequately staffed departments. Everybody in summer is always got too much going on. Maybe you're down a few staff members and you don't have the personnel to actually take this on. I would again caution you don't have to do it all in one semester or one summer. You can make this an ongoing project. And using ICD, as I mentioned with the fire safety workshop, if your situational factors change, you're going to have to update things anyway. But it is well worth the investment. Faculty that have used this model have seen significant increase in learning in their classrooms, that students are much more engaged and involved and really appreciate the extra effort that's gone into planning the course. Some resources for you. Fink and Associates has a wonderful website. They have 38-page handouts that is kind of a summary of the book, which is a worksheet that walks you through the whole process. I mentioned a Big EO Center for Auburn, but your campus probably has a center for teaching and learning or something along those lines. Start to make friends there, get to know them, attend their programs. You'll find if you're going to these programs, not a lot of faculty take advantage of this, and that's unfortunate. But usually there's space to include some folks from Res Life. We're regular attendees of these programs. Also, I mentioned the Professional Organizational Development Network, which is that faculty development workshop. And I'm a resource to you if you want to email me. I'd be happy to help you out. I will mention that this May, there's going to be a program in Chicago. It's an annual national workshop that Fink offers. And it's going to be in downtown Chicago at Loyola University Chicago campus. But it's a 3-day workshop, and it's a working workshop. You actually will walk away with a very detailed plan for redeveloping your class or workshop or whatever it is you want to take. There is a graduate student discount, and if you register before May 6th, it's $650, which I think is really reasonable for that kind of a workshop. Hotels are a little expensive in the downtown area, but if you want a reason to go to Chicago, good opportunity, and you'll be at my alma mater at Loyola. So what questions do you have? And also, what were some of your big takeaways from this workshop today? Yes?
Can you talk to me about why plenty of academics out there that have their ideas about this is the best way to go about doing this? Are there other, why does Fink person is sort of the impetus or driving force behind what they're working?
So why is
like,
Dr. Fink the driving force? I think there's other people too.
Right.
He's one of them.
Right.
So
I guess how do you evaluate and determine who you should sort of be listening to as voice of reason?
So who's the voice of reason? Why do you think? There's lots of people out there. I went to the workshop yesterday on residential curriculum, and in a lot of ways, it's very similar to this. It's very intentional, very. It's not to say that one's better than the other. You can pick and choose all these different tools. When you read his book, you will see he talks about self-authorship, and he talks about a lot of the folks that we read about in our higher ed literature. He's really picked up on a lot of that. So I think he's very inclusive of a lot of the theories about learning that are out there. He's very cutting edge in that way about pulling them all in. The thing that you're not going to get from him, which you probably would need for others, is more about actual course management, handling different things that come up in the classroom, classroom assessment techniques and things like there's plenty of other resources that you can refer to, but I think he has a more holistic approach. Does that help answer your question? Okay. Yes.
How many different classes do you have designed for students to violate policy?
How many?
How many different types of presentations are there for students who violate policy?
Oh, right now we have two. We have the community, he asked if how many classes we have for students who violate policy. It's community standards and ethical decision making, and then the fire safety. We talked about designing a workshop for roommates. That could kind of be like some remedial, marriage counseling, I guess, and come to our workshop and we'll help you figure out how to live together with somebody else before we allow you to switch rooms, but we haven't gotten that far yet. Yes?
I am really interested in the verbs that you're talking about.
Yes.
So I don't know where can I find these verbs to use for learning activities.
If you go, so she wants to know where you can find the verbs that we talked about. There are in his book, Creating Significant Learning Experiences. It talks about it. Also, the worksheets that are on his website have that list. And there's if you just Google it, you'll come up with other things too. There's also a list of verbs that with some nice infographics that are with the Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're just that kind of person that wants to see lots of examples, if you do some Google searches, you'll find that. Any takeaways, things that you think you might start doing next week on using ICD? Could be a little nugget of information that you just got. She mentioned she wants to use those verbs. What else? Yes. Can you speak up?
I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but the graph that had the things that you learn in training and how to train.
Oh, the castle top. Yes.
Captain Tom.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a really interesting way to map out what your major needs are. We all essentially have the same major needs, but how you go at them is different.
Mhm.
And that's a good way for us strategizing how we're going to approach this versus that.
Right.
And it really needs to be in training things or like post-training, pre-training, or like in area.
Yes, that's exactly right. So her takeaway is that it would be the castle top model gives you a way to kind of map out what happens in training, out of training, and the online training, and reading the manual, the RA manual makes it very useful because now they're applying that knowledge in your workshops. Yes, thank you. Yes.
I think that just changing my thought process about creating first the dream of what I want to happen, and then from there move to what you said about the evidence and then the activities.
Yes. So you like the starting that imaginative exercise of the dream, and then using that to frame everything that you're doing with your workshop. Yeah, it's very helpful. Yes.
I think my takeaway is the partnership opportunities with faculty. And sometimes we don't take much advantage of. We tend to follow other student professionals, and that's great. But you raise awareness to faculty development opportunities that are offered on campus that we can take advantage of as well. So I think just that partnership, and me thinking about, oh, I know our faculty development person, she can come in and probably help train on some classroom assessment techniques or some course design that we can help take advantage of. So I think that partnership is important.
Thank you for bringing that up. The partnerships with faculty, we talk about that all the time. How can we get to know faculty? One of the best ways is attending these workshops. When you're sitting in a small group and look at you, you have all the answers because you've been doing this for a long time, and they don't know a darn thing about the makeup of your freshman class or where they live or what some of the issues developmentally they might be facing or things like that. And you do. They look at you a little differently, like, oh, you do know these things, or I was working with a person who works with faculty on her campus, and she said, this kind of hurts me, but she said, I didn't know that student affairs people cared about learning. really darn, and partly because she had positive interactions with student affairs people on her campus. And so there's an opportunity there to start having these real basic conversations When I first started working with Dr. Fink, I went to his national workshop, and 5 minutes, thank you. And I went to his workshop, and I was the only student affairs person in the room of 50 some faculty. And that was a little intimidating at first, but as time went on, people would come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, I used to be a faculty in residence," or "I worked with so and so with a living learning community." They kind of got what I was about, and were able to find those connections. And I found that over time, I've had the opportunity to go to different workshops with them, and every year there's been at least a handful of folks that have that. And I've also been able to bring up, oh gosh, would you like to get involved with the living learning community or a faculty in residence program? One of the faculty in residence that I have on our campus right now was somebody who I met through the video center, and turns out he was really interested. He knew a friend who had been a faculty in residence at another campus and jumped at the chance to be a faculty in residence. Well, wouldn't have met him if I hadn't had that initial interactions with the Center for Faculty Development. So awesome. Any other takeaways? We've got just a couple minutes left. All right. Well, I want to mention, I don't have like a sign-up sheet, but if you do want to give me your cards, I'd be happy to, send you some additional resources. And this PowerPoint will be available through the CHO site and whatnot. But if I can answer any questions for you afterwards, please leave your cards. And if you'd like to see more about these workshops that we've done, we'd happy to send you more information about that. Really appreciate your being here. Thanks to CHO for broadcasting this to all of the Southeast. Pretty awesome. But for folks out there, if you also want to, email me, it's virginia.cook@auburn.edu. Be happy to hear from you and appreciate your being here today. Thank you.